welcome everyone to the Unmuted podcast. It's a podcast that is about all things HR, talent, and HR tech. And so I'm Jeff Holman, the founder of ScaleHR, and the podcast host. And so we're actually bringing this podcast back after a bit of a sort of a timeout hiatus, and I'm actually quite pleased that we're doing that. And we're going to be publishing episodes on a weekly basis starting next month, September. And so please stay close to our YouTube channel and our website at GoScaleHR.com. And so this one, really cool for me, actually. And so before we bring in our guest, HR Tech, the HR Tech conference in Las Vegas is happening October 10th to the 12th at the infamous Mandalay Bay resort. And I'm going to be there. First time in 5 years, I'm actually making my return. So as I tell everyone, roll out the red Canadian carpet and, so I can come back. But I'm actually quite excited to, be coming back to Vegas for this conference. And so, before I bring in Alper and Adam, I just wanted to just talk a bit about just my sort of kind of thoughts on HR tech. I've been in the industry for over 20 years. And so obviously during the past few years, we've seen an absolute explosion in the HR tech marketplace with brand new companies popping onto the scene, as well as sort of longer standing companies and platforms basically expanding their footprint and capabilities. And so as a result of the pandemic, the world of work has changed quite a bit. And so as a result, HR tech has had to re-strategize and pivot. And so, and I think it's, last point is, people around the world, teams, all over the place are relying heavily on, work tech. And I think that is probably more so today than in any other time in our history. And so bringing in our guest today, I just wanted from two of my favorite HR tech companies, Findem and Hibob. And so Alper, Tekin of Findem, and Adam Phelps of Hibob. And so I want to welcome you both to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Jeff.
Okay. So I thought we would just start off this, episode. If you could each take just a couple of minutes or, a couple of seconds and talk a bit about your roles and also the second part of this question is why you love HR tech. So maybe we'll start with Alper.
All right, sure. So I'm Alper Tekin. I've been with Findem for over 2 years as the Chief Product Officer. Findem is basically a talent acquisition management solution. What we believe is unique about us is that we are powered by what we call attributes. You can think of those as like a new unit for talent data that sort of goes beyond your classic resume or LinkedIn. We sometimes call it three-dimensional data, which is basically data around you, data about the company over a timeline. And a good example of that would be like if you're looking for a Python developer, like it's hard to sort of understand just by looking at like a LinkedIn or like resumes. Is this person proficient in Python? Which Python are we even talking about? Are we talking about a zoologist or like an actual person? But when you actually can verify that they have written like thousands of lines of Python code in a publicly verifiable repository, that would be an attribute. Give me people who have verified Python repositories. In like 3 seconds, you have an actual high quality slate from that point of view. Layer on things like everyone talks about themselves as like startup people, but are you a startup person? What is a startup, right? But you can like objectify that by saying, okay, tell me if Adam, for instance, joined the Hibob and Hibob was a Series A, B, C, D company, and like really objectify like, the fuzziness within which the hiring manager may be asking for candidates. So that's what we do. And obviously we'll talk more, but like there's a bunch of AI and workflow automation on top of it. What I like about the industry is that I think it's just like anything else. It's constantly rethinking itself, and we'll talk more about like the pressures the industry has been facing. Last 2 years has been very eventful. So, and I feel myself very lucky to be right. I feel myself lucky to be a part of this thing that we're collectively trying to do, rethink the whole thing, and that gives me a lot of fire in the belly. I'll give it to Adam. Sorry, a long answer.
No, it sounds good. I mean, we're actually going to get more into the actual platform itself, later on in the show. But Adam, do you want to maybe just sort of talk a bit about your role, Hibob, and maybe why you absolutely love HR tech?
Oh, I do, Jeff, as you know, and it's always a pleasure to chat. So thanks for having us on. So yeah, I'm Adam Phelps. I'm a sales director for Hibob, based out of New York City. I've been working here for about 6.5 years at Hibob now in the HR tech space, supporting both in the US and Canadian markets here. So a hugely exciting time to be in the HR tech space, particularly in this particular sphere as well. We'll talk, I know, more about Hibob in a little bit, but ultimately it is a kind of HRIS and people management platform to look after that full employee life cycle for wherever the employees are in the globe, everything from the data, it's that kind of self-service nature, and everything in between as well. But we'll get to that in good time. And because I think really for me, HR tech as a whole it really feels like the place to be in recent years in particular. I think just the amount of shifts have been, even since I joined Hibob back in 2017, and the emphasis that companies are now putting onto people versus potentially how they saw some of the HR kind of strategies in the past has been significant in this change. Particularly as you look at, whether it's like the change from COVID, whether it's the growth of 2021, the kind of quiet quitting, layoffs, we've seen tons of trends in 3 or 4 years. And that meant that tech has really had to innovate and had a catalyst for change to be so quick in comparison to what it has been before or other spaces as well. And for me, I think that's why it's such an exciting space to be in, because you've seen the innovation, you've seen the investment in the space, and it always keeps you on your toes, that's for sure.
Thank you for that. I mean, and that's a great sort of segue into our next question, really. I mean, obviously, the broader HR tech marketplace is saturated. I mean, there's sort of category, and then there's a subcategory, and then there's the subcategory for the subcategory, and it's just going that way. But obviously, Hibob and Findem have been, in my eyes, moving and shaking, like in your categories and niches. But can you just give us a really short overview? And I know Alper's already talked a bit about Findem already, but can you give us a short overview of your respective platform? Like, don't go into a lot of detail, but just to sort of highlight the main things that people should know about your platform. So let's start with Adam.
Just the way you put guardrails on us, Jeff. I'm sure Alper and I could spend the whole time talking about our platforms on this as well. So we'll do our best to keep it concise for you. But
not about 20 seconds.
Yeah. So Hibob, where we are is a people management platform. So we're a HRIS designed to look after everything from the moment someone joins the organization to the moment they leave. And what we really look to be is that key source of truth about your company's people, whether that's around retention metrics, around about development, goal conversations, through to how that impacts compensation, merit, and the kind of workforce plan that goes on beyond that. We really look to be that source of truth throughout. And a big cornerstone of this is thinking big. Companies are global so much more frequently these days. And how do you ensure that you can have that global consistency, but allowing for those local nuances in everything you do, and providing a really engaged experience to boot for your employees? So that's really key fundamentals to us across the board there. And I think it's really synonymous with some of the big shifts we've seen in HR tech. And we're incredibly excited to be leading that at the forefront there as well.
Fantastic. Alper, do you have any, what's your sort of 20 to 30 second overview of Findem?
Sure. Yeah, again, like we're all in the same higher sort of domain of HR tech. We started approaching it from talent acquisition side. So like before we joined the organization with Adam's framework here. And the whole idea is how can we make that experience more seamless? And again, we have the fundamental belief that you cannot reduce a person to their resume or LinkedIn, and that the industry, after being with LinkedIn for 20 years, needs like a new approach a data-centric approach. And just like Google wouldn't serve you like, that any old person, like, there is a need for specificity. We would also like pride ourselves of having built and indexed anything that's publicly available to give you a 3D vision into an individual and workflows around that.
So, I mean, obviously, like our viewers here for this podcast are sort of HR talent, leaders and practitioners, probably more so in Canada, the US, and a very heavy skew in the tech industry. So, so the next question is, why are you leading in your categories, and then what makes you different? Because obviously, for Hibob, there's about 1,000,001 different, uh, uh, HRIS is out there, and then from a talent perspective, you've got ATSs, you've got sourcing tools, you've got this, you've got that. So maybe start with Alper and Findem. What makes you different?
Yeah, I think there is like levels of differentiation. What is a sustainable differentiation? If I may slightly change the question, is this entire data asset that is made that is powered mostly by AI and like lots of big data that we have amassed over time. Again, like a lot of people will talk about themselves as startup people. So like, just try searching for, I'm looking for senior Python developers with B2B early stage startup experience. That query is almost unanswerable in like a short amount of time with the current tool set. So from an outbound perspective, like using LinkedIn and like the existing sort of tool set is just like not very scalable. That's the initial departure point. Like there is a fundamental differentiation on how much you will know using Findem about a candidate versus sort of a resume LinkedIn. Then take that and extend it across the entire stack. Like, same visibility into your existing ATS data, existing CRM data, all the people that you may know that are great candidates out there, like folding that into like one single pane of glass is the workflow innovation that we have made. So what that allows you to do is in say under a minute, you can get a slate of super qualified and verified candidates in front of you from an inbound perspective as well as from an outbound perspective. So we believe through that we save a lot of like time and efficiency for our end users. Again, the fundamental differentiation is that that 700 million individuals strong and 4 million companies strong sort of attribute database.
So just a follow-on question on that one. I mean, obviously, LinkedIn is obviously like a huge platform, today, and I would probably say that about 98, more percent of talent and HR practitioners are on it and actually use it. And so there's a sort of almost like a re-education or an education or a bit of a change management process that has to take place. So how do you deal with that? I mean, it's probably one of the top websites that I can think of that has been entrenched in our workflow, in our brain for the last 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Yeah, it seems like a simple question, but it probably has like 5-6 components. Like let me start by saying it's a huge component of what we're trying to do. Because like imagine like introducing anything other than Salesforce to a sales team, and like that's similar to sort of what you're trying to do as you're trying to innovate in this field. Okay, which makes it actually like a little exciting. There is a big challenge. So a couple of things you need to do. I find there is few vectors here. You need to partner with the VP of talent and like build a shared vision and like really have that person really believe in what you can be doing, and that this is not an overnight thing. Like, there is definitely a re-education, as you call it. So you need to secure that so that person gives direction that this is our future, this is what we're going to use, and like really sort of stays with it. That's one thing. Obviously, the UI UX experience has to be familiar enough before it gets too complex. You don't want to change like an entire sort of new way of looking at it overnight. You want to handhold them through a very, let's say, a simple UI that they're and usage patterns that they're used to, and then over time simplify it. But another huge vector is the use of AI, right? So again, hiring managers, when they say, give me a senior Java developer with so and so much experience from these companies with early startup experience, we now have technology to really express that in our new system. So all you need to do is look at candidates, which is something that they're already familiar with. So if AI gives us that jump, that re-education, and reduces that re-education cost, that's going to be that's basically where we're investing on and have seen really good success. But again, it's not a one-dimensional thing. It's a multivariate function, so to say.
Sure. That, sort of interesting on that topic. So I want to shift over to Hibob. Obviously, yours is a bit different. The actual recognition, and I think the education process is probably not as tedious and as sort of in depth as they find them is. But maybe Adam, maybe we can just talk a bit about why is Hibob leading in a category, and what makes the platform different.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of key things that have been real big drivers in the change in the HR tech space that have been really central to us as part of all of this that we've looked to focus on. I think one of these is, despite the contractions and expansions of companies' headcount as they've looked to grow aggressively, then they've had to cut back and whatever it may be and kind of grow again. A big focus we've seen of this, particularly since COVID, is the rise of the international workforces, global organizations, and how do we ensure that we provide a kind of global consistency to our workflows and the way that we work day to day, but also allow for the local nuance, allowing for the different ways that different parts of the world do work, whether that's around about the compliance pieces that you need to capture, whether it's around about language, whether it's around about policies that they have in different places as well. How do you ensure that everyone feels part of the same organization and motivated to that, but allowing for their regional nuance? And that's been a big focus of ours for sure. We are very much an international organization ourselves. I think we've got in about 7 different countries. We've got physical offices and remote employees and many more. So that's been a really big area that we've looked to really excel at by having that flexibility and also that kind of nuance in different areas too. But I think a big part of what this then leads into as the other big trend that we're seeing in HR tech is how do we continue to empower strategic HR leaders to be proactive in what they're doing. And when they come into the top table to have that discussion, the conversation used to be get HR to the top table. And I think for most forward-looking businesses, they're there now. But now it's how do we continue to empower HR leaders at the top table to be as central to business strategy as they are? And to do that, they need that right type of proactive-based data, the ability to understand not just what's happened today, but what's around the corner. How can we predict, of your top talent, who's a potential attrition or flight risk, of those that you have, who are the ones we need to invest more in and continue to develop and grow with as well. And we've looked to do this in a few different ways. I mean, a big part of it is how do we engage with the employees themselves? The more data, the more touch points we have the employees, the more that you're gathering, the more data points you have as well as an organization that you can use to feed into this. And also, how can we use the tool that we have to help give more insights about what this could mean for them? So there's been a lot of work that we've looked to do, but I think a big differentiator for us has been, again, the global reach, having the right types of data points you need, and doing so by really engaging with employees, whether that's around about performance and development, through to things like compensation and merit, and how do all these link together to make sure that we're investing the money in the right areas for the right people.
Yeah, I think the key thing that you talked about is the term proactive data. And that's a bit of a shift for a lot of people, because I obviously used to be, a VP of HR for tech companies. And so I've always been sort of early adopter, to most things. But, the notion that the HR leaders are not really that great at data. And so, having that conversation with them about, no, this isn't just about sort of running a report, 2 months later, or, trying to figure out why Johnny left, the company last year. No. This is about sort of proactive data. And I think it's still in its sort of infancy, but I'm really happy that, obviously Hibob playing a lead role in this. And so you talked a bit about some things with the pandemic. And so that sort of segues into my next question. So I think it's sort of safe to say that things have changed a lot in the last, 3.5 years. And, obviously HR tech has, been a part of that. And so, maybe talk a bit about talk about the top major thing that has changed when it comes to work tech, that sort of combination, and then how have your respective platforms adapted to that? So maybe start with Adam.
Yeah, I'm going to be at a risk of repeating myself a little bit, but I do think it really holds true. I think, as I mentioned, during the pandemic, we saw a lot of change with companies hiring anywhere because people were working remotely, virtually, so you could afford to not have to worry about who was commutable. You could worry about getting the best talent for the role that you had, which is a great opportunity for a lot of companies to tap into different markets, into different talent pools. But then, of course, once you've hired all these great individuals, it's a whole different logistical issue of like, how do we keep them engaged? How do we retain this top talent? How do we make sure that we are keeping compliant in different areas and things like this too as well? So that was one such example that for sure. And for us as a platform, we've done a ton to ensure that we can manage things like the different time offs around the globe, the different kind of policies and information you need to capture as well. But also, how do we communicate with these different groups? How do we make sure they feel just as connected to the head office as the people sitting there do? How to make sure they can understand what's happening, the key kind of takeaways, and really buy into that overall. Because as the pandemic passed and we saw a lot of companies in boom mode, it came about not just the fact you've hired these great people, it's like, how do we keep them really connected and retained? Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of other people who also can access the talent pool now as well, looking to get this top talent too. And we found that a lot of this is that employees really want a way to, again, feel connected to what's happening, but also understand what it means for their development and how they're going to continue to grow themselves. So a lot of the work that we've done is how do we continue to put more into place about achieving these goals, like measuring these goals, driving success, understanding what success looks like, and then mapping all this back into other conversations around compensation or workforce planning, and how do we really complete that loop because you have all this data in the same place. So I think that's been a significant trend that we've seen and one that we've definitely looked to support.
Yeah, obviously you have actually launched, workforce planning and then compensation, obviously in the last 2 years, well, I mean, less than 2 years. So, it's nice to see that sort of new modules and functionalities are being added. So, Alper, your story is probably a bit different. I know that, Findem's gone through quite a bit of change. So maybe talk a bit about that one critical key thing that had changed, during the pandemic, and then how that sort of influenced, Findem pivoting or tweaking or changing their product.
Yeah, I think I can put it well. Like the pandemic changed a lot of things, but like right after that, we just came to the end of like 10+ year bull market as well. So I think that was a very fundamental shift for us as well. Like there was a mentality of grow at any cost, which basically means you can buy any new technology if it gives you one more hire, right? So like it's fine, spend like 20K here, 50K there. It doesn't have to be strategic. They don't really have to talk to each other because we're already late to our sort of like quarterly targets. That mentality just like went all the way to the other opposite, I would say. Like especially with Gen AI now coming in, people are talking about efficiency, like we need to wait to consolidate this stack, reduce spend, improve productivity, etc., and like better visibility across channels, right? So again, like similar to Adam, we don't exist as a single sort of like tool company. You need the connectedness from your ATS to CRM to talent acquisition in the future to skills management and all that. It's one sort of daisy chain of like information that has to flow, and that wasn't possible with that just like hundreds and hundreds of like point solutions somewhat talking to each other through like a Tableau dashboard. So that is changing, and Gen AI is like a big component of that. If nothing else, it injects that kind of paranoia that you have to be more efficient now, and like what are my competitors doing it, can I do the same task with like 1/10 the resources? So there's a big rethink in the industry that's happening, and the way we reacted to it is like, again, our core differentiation has always been this data asset that is the attributes that talent cloud. Now we have found ways to serve that across multiple workflows, call them apps, but so you liberate that data bus across various use cases, and like instead of like one company having to work with 10 vendors to get that consolidated stack, they can work with us and to achieve the same. And it comes with everything sort of like already like integrated. If you think about it, the dashboards, etc., they're just out of the box and they all talk to each other. So the trend has been benefiting us quite well. This whole mind shift.
No, absolutely. And then, obviously, Findem just launched a new AI assistant. Is that correct? So obviously,
Correct. Yes.
that term has, I mean, it's not like a, earth-shattering name for it, but, maybe talk a bit about that.
Yeah, I would say it's like a set of technologies, and like again, like depending on how deep you want to go. ChatGPT changed a lot of things. It was the first sort of
Yeah.
public statement out there. I mean, AI existed for like since the 60s, right? Maybe even like earlier. But it was the first time like a company got it right, and like the end user didn't have to study like advanced maths to sort of operate it, right? So once the cat was out of the bag, obviously everyone has started experimenting with it. And soon enough, they hit bunch of like roadblocks, like there is limitations in terms of like the context you can have. It sometimes make stuff up. So it's what we've seen early on is we took a route of not launching something overnight and sort of really make sure that it powers workflows end to end. So we
Okay.
launched four versions of that. Well, four different use cases of it. One to again in with natural language starting a search. So going back to your example, switching costs from any system to a new system is very high. How can we use AI to sort of reduce that switching cost? Right now, you can basically converse with our AI bot to start a search. Like, hey, give me a list of senior Java developers in the Bay Area with X and Y sort of attributes. That gives you a list of individuals. You don't have to learn the new interface. The second example is you can ask AI, look at any one of the 700 million candidates on our database and say, how does this person uniquely match my search criteria? And things like, hey, can you write an email to my hiring manager to sell this candidate so I don't have to write that summary, which takes a long time, and it basically looks at the candidate and her skills, matches that to that particular position or JD they're looking for, and just summarizes that and like a ready to go fashion. So that's another innovation. We talked about platform analytics. We have instrumented our entire analytics with AI capabilities. So you look at any chart and you can ask AI, what am I looking at? And it will basically summarize you what the trends are. You can converse with it to democratize that sort of access to data across all levels, right? Like, so even a recruiter can say, am I ready to hit my target this quarter? And I can get answers. And then there is more sort of generic use cases of, hey, write a campaign for me, make it less formal.
Sure.
That's more like a commoditize at this point. And those are a few areas that we invested in, and we'll talk about what the future looks like.
Good. I mean, pretty cool. I mean, but I think, the one thought that keep coming to mind is that it just saves a lot of time. Like just imagine, the amount of hours. I mean, back in the day, like we used to do everything manually, use spreadsheets and like keep track of workflows and stuff. And my God, like, by 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, my brain was just ready to explode. And so this is, 20 plus years later. And so this has come, obviously the explosion. And so this sort of segues into my next question. So, before we get into, the HR Tech conference, I just want to ask, your thoughts about what do you think in that show is the future of HR Tech? I mean, obviously we've gone through so much change in the last, 3 years and, innovation and so on. So if you ask me, I have no idea. So I'm going to ask you, so let's start with Alper. What's your thought?
Sure. I mean, I actually will also take a similar position. We have some hypotheses, but I think there's a couple sort of tectonic changes that will impact it. One, again, we talked about it, I think, profusely, like AI and how to use it. Like, you cannot just like take ChatGPT and use it. It's not that simple. Like, you need
Right.
middleware, you probably need your own LLM, train that, etc. There is the concept of workflow automation, i.e., like when you look at the life of a sourcer, day of a sourcer's life, you'll probably see somewhere between 25 to 30 distinct set of tasks that they need to go through. and like which parts can you sort of do on her behalf so she doesn't have to worry about scheduling, for instance, or like sending that thank you email if a candidate's not a good match. So how much can you free them up to do more strategic stuff, so that there is that automation that needs to be figured out. And then we really are curious to partner up with talent leaders that have bold statements to make in terms of what's the talent organization of the future, because it will change. But like, where will it morph to? Are we going to see more sources, less sources? Are we going to see like specialized roles, like roles for that just do skills management, for instance? Like, what will that look like, and what's the future we're going? How will the org change? Because we're doing what we're doing to serve those individuals. Look like, what will that organization look like? Is an interesting theme. And then I would think that the whole Adam and Alper's worlds colliding, like this end-to-endness to HR tech, like where you really want to know a lot about the individual before they enter the org, based on the information within the org, so to say. Like, who does well in this organization, so I get more of those individuals. Can we do like better sort of end-to-end career planning and things like that? Those are some of the trends. Again, like we're more technologists than sort of like always like industry experts. That's why like occasions like this in HR tech, those events, is good to sort of really collectively think through what it could be looking like in the next 3 to 5 years. A bit of a non-answer, but at least like we feel
No, it's
like there's
fine.
like multiple trends happening.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, if I would have been talking to you both in January of 2020, I don't think anybody would have predicted anything that has happened, right? So I think, I mean, I'm not saying that there's going to be another whatever global pandemic, and I certainly hope not. But but my point is that it's really difficult nowadays to sort of forecast the future because it happens so fast. And so I do have a question, but I'm going to wait until after Adam gives his thoughts on what the future of HR tech.
So again, I don't pretend to have a crystal ball by any means, but I think a big focus of HR tech moving forward is going to be kind of what you just alluded to. Jeff, you said, it's very hard, for anyone to predict the future right now, but the more and more that we can empower HR to at least have an idea of what's coming, and I don't necessarily mean for like global changing events, I mean from within their company, I think that data piece is going to become more and more relevant. We spoke about it a little bit earlier about like the move to getting data involved more, having proactive data. When you're having like HR leaders are at the top table having the conversations about what the people's strategies impact is on the wider business objectives and how to ensure that they're closely aligned. I think as more and more these conversations continue to happen, making sure you've got the right data to empower HR people leaders is going to be pivotal. So I think data's for current and historic was already there. I know in Hibob will capture huge amounts of it from throughout the employee lifecycle, but it's going to be more and more about like, what does this then mean? Knowing what we know, what does this allow us to think about, and like having tools that can help connect the dots as part of that. I know AI is a big talked about piece. Alper's talked about it a lot about how he's in the recruitment space, but although those kind of things are definitely going to continue to play a part in the employee life cycle, I think it's going to be just a broader understanding of like the information that we know based on the company, what's been happening and the trends, and like what we should do with this data. Like, what does this enable us to do? What's the right next step? If we can see our ENPS is dropping and that we're seeing a retention change as well, like, are there any commonalities here? Like, how can we get better at spotting these potentially even before that has happened based on what we know to enable HR leaders to really get ahead of the curve? And I think that's going to be the big shift here. And we've already started doing some things in Hibob, for instance, around about attrition indicators, about how potentially based on what we know about the workforce, those who may be more likely to leave, and how to marry that with your top performers versus mid performers and the ones that you really need to double down on. Like, I think this type of trend that we've already been seeing start is going to continue to gather pace. And how do we really ensure that we can empower HR people, not just with reams of data, but something that's really actionable that they can take to the table?
Yeah. I mean, you talked about sort of, fundamental, data management or, proactive data, and there's lots of other industries that have been doing this for years, right? And
Right.
I think, HR is sort of, lagging a bit, from that point of view. And then, obviously Alper talking about something that is really specific to, recruiting and sourcing. And while that part of HR, I guess, it's a very, specific area of HR that typically is sort of ahead of the curve a little bit from a from a technology standpoint. But my question that I wanted to ask you both was, with the emergence of things like AI, for example, and data and so on, what are your thoughts about AI sort of taking over humans in terms of jobs? And I have a point of view on this, and I've argued with many people about this. But I wanted to just hear your thoughts on that, because it's a huge concern, and I think it's valid, because people just don't know, and they try to fill in the blank with something, and so they're sort of guesstimating. And so, what are your thoughts about that? I mean, Adam, do you think the big bad AI machine going to take over jobs in HR and people? Well, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, there's going to be an interesting perspective opinions here for someone on the product side of Alper and someone on the sales and the art side, shall we say,
Yeah, I
for
guess, yeah.
myself. So we're definitely, I'm sure, going to have different perspectives on it. But, I think for me, we are going to continue to see its involvement. I don't think people are fully sure yet how or why in certain job roles. I think in some it's obvious, and others it's harder in different industries, in different roles within that. So I don't know if we know the full impact for that candidly as part of it. I mean, I think what I anticipate us seeing it is the opportunity for a lot of the workforce, I guess, an opportunity for a lot more of the workforce to get away from tactical items and a lot more on using the information that the AI can generate from processing the general tasks, like Alper was saying, like from candidate letters and things like that, all these time-consuming tasks, like for the employees, like you can take them away from that and invest them in something more impactful, and like having as a chance really for empowerment for employees in that sense, because we still need people. We're not going to get away from that, but we can put these talents to better use to things which have a wider impact and a bigger across organizations, and that's going to be hugely exciting. Obviously, there's going to be a gap that we then need to better bridge on, like how do we get entry level workers really to get to that point in the conversation if there's AI doing a lot of tactical work. So there's going to be things that we're going to need to work out society wise in how we're going to bridge some of these things, particularly as AI gets more and more nuanced. But I do think it's going to allow a lot of people to get to the bigger picture items they want to get to, as AI can replace more sometimes tactical items, or you can spend your time using what AI has provided as opposed to having to generate it yourself.
Yeah, perfect. Alper, thoughts?
I think similarly. First of all, it's not a HR team specific kind of impact. I would say, like, product management, selling, it's all those will, I think, change. But even if in our wildest dreams, it's an augmentation versus replacement. Like, as I mentioned, like we actually did a study of, like, what does a day in life look like, and there's some components just makes zero sense to sort of like try to go after with an AI use case. So I think the challenges are much more sort of like near term about like privacy, like, making sure it doesn't make stuff up, and like, can you really use it in an enterprise grade as opposed to like, will it fundamentally like, like replace people? Like, it's not our design. We're all about augmentation, but there's some stuff that no one is going to raise their hands and like, yeah, I want to look at every resume for like 6 minutes for the rest of my life. I mean, that's like not a very defendable position anyways, and I think those will be augmented. It's been augmented. Like, we're using so much AI without calling it AI right now, and we call it like cool product, a usability hack, stuff like that. So I think it's going to be similar to that. I don't think like we're going to one day where like things flip over type of stuff. So I'm a big sort of pro AI person, with again making sure that like we get it right though. Like today, around the PII, making sure like the biases don't creep in, and being responsible about it, and like not declaring early victories around that. So.
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously a lot of issues with ethical AI. Like, I just read an article yesterday about an organization that's in the retail space that are now using facial recognition software to track customers in stores, and I'm thinking, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's sort of borderline for me. And of course, obviously, Microsoft recently came out with some stuff on tracking people's usage of time screen and all this kind of stuff, and I'm like, if it starts to borderline the creepiness and the infringement of privacy, there's a bit of a sort of moral, ethical problem there. And so that that's not something that we can solve now, today, but it's something that I think that organizations need to be mindful of and thinking about. So it's really interesting. So I just want to get to the fun stuff here. So HR Tech is coming up, October 10th to 12th in the beautiful city of Las Vegas in the middle of nowhere. And I've been there many times before as a stout and fan of the game of blackjack. I will be there for that reason, but I am going there to obviously sort of check out all of the various platforms and vendors and companies and so on. So you're both going to be there, which is great. So why did you choose, to attend and obviously invest money to exhibit and sponsor and all those good things? And then what will you be focusing on while you're there? Obviously every organization has a bit of a push in terms of focusing on a certain thing. So let's start with Alper and Findem. So just comment on that.
It's going to be my first, but our company has done it a few times. We're relatively,
oh boy.
I should talk to you before you get some advice. So we're relatively new. We have about 4 years and of history since the foundation by Hari and Raghu. But we developed so much product and technology in the meantime. I think what's going to be great for us to really sort of come out and start talking about it, this sort of new larger mandates and how we differentiate. It's obviously a very noisy place, but again, it's not an HR thing. If you go to data management, same story. So it's good to be there, represent, be proud of what we're trying to do, but more than anything, get perspectives. We're extremely hungry for feedback. We still maintain that we're more with technologists that try to surround themselves with experts to sort of get this right. But when it's technology, we're very good at it. We're very fast at it, but we have to keep grounded in reality. That's why company goes there. That's why I'm there. I personally will be demoing and hoping to get people into conversations with me on what we're getting right, but more important, what we're not getting right. So that feedback will be great. And so also just saying we're here and to encourage that feedback loop will be great for us.
Yeah.
And I even did my homework and we're going to be at booth 1417. Hopefully that's where we're at. So
oh my gosh. Okay. So we'll have to
very specific.
take note of that. I didn't think that, they had the booth, allocated already, but I get that, good thing. So they're very organized.
That's what I do. Anyways,
no, but I mean, obviously the trade show is about foot traffic and it's about 12,000 people there. And so obviously you're sort of one of many, but I'll be interested to see what kind of stuff that you're going to have at your booth. So let's segue over to Adam. Adam, this is not your first rodeo at HR Tech, so you're a seasoned veteran. So, why is Hibob there, and then what are you sort of focusing on for this coming show?
Well, yeah, not my first time, and I think Blackjack's probably more a fan of me than I am of it, based on my current record so far. So, doing something right/wrong for Vegas, I suppose. But anyway, it's a great time, and we're definitely excited to be back there again this year for this. I think we've really enjoyed in the past the opportunity, obviously, to meet customers there, meet potential people looking to explore that as well. It's always been a great opportunity just due to the type and the scale of the audience that you get there. There's also just some great conversations with speakers there to be involved and understand the trends in the industry as part of that. And I think that's something that's always really valuable in terms of understanding kind of what's happening right now. I know we're also excited to contribute to that discussion this time. Our very own CMO, Sarah Reynolds, they are speaking around embracing pay transparency and the types of conversations that bring as well. So we're really excited to learn more, contribute as well as part of it, and also continue to hear about what else is happening in space and speak to people with experience with Bob, for those who want experience with Bob, and it's just a great chance to get face to face with people as well. So that's really exciting for us too. We do a headshot lounge most years there. We've got another one this year as well for people who want to get headshots done, which is also a really nice way just to have a very candid conversation, even if people aren't looking to partake in software right now, just to have that kind of conversation and open up the doors as well. So we always really appreciate that too. And like Alper, did my homework. Booth 1713 is the one to do it. So we're prepared between Alper and I in this one.
But I'm not going to ask you like which corner of this massive room.
Don't push me, Jeff. I look good right now that I remember the booth number. Don't make me look bad with forgetting which corner I'm in.
Not a problem. That's fine. All right. So obviously, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be there, hanging out with Findem and Hibob, and then a bunch of others as well. And then I'm looking forward to seeing you both there. I just wanted to just comment. Thank you both for being here. Obviously, for this episode, hope our viewers, got insights into these two really cool organizations. And I know that a lot of my clients and my network are customers of yours both. And I'm trying to use some coercive, tactic to try to get them moving over from certain platforms. And I'm not going to name them to, yours. I'm not going to shame anyone, today. But I think the moral of the story here is, technology is growing. AI is a big part of that data, proactive data. And I think I'm actually really encouraged for the future of, HR tech. I love it. And I know that a lot of my peers do as well. And so, so thank you both for being here. And just to remind everyone, so Unmuted is a podcast. I brought it back. We're bringing it back to a life again, and we're going to be publishing new episodes every week starting in September. And topics are all focused on HR talent, HR tech, and so this is our first one that we're going to be launching next month, and obviously focused on HR tech. But we're going to have HR leaders on the show, talent leaders, practitioners, and thought leaders from across North America and Europe as well. So to both of you, thanks for being here.